Hello, very cold Grand Strand. This is Richard Florzak, the private chef to the stars, and welcome back to Talking About Food. It's the only local food review show on the Grand Strand. We talk strictly about food, about restaurants, about food trucks, festivals, farmers market. I haven't been to a farmer's market yet. The show started a little bit after the farmers market season, so I can't wait to get to some of those places, and especially when boiled peanut season starts in the spring, I believe it is. I have a couple of good friends that are going to come on the show and fight it out as to what is the best boiled peanut recipe. We don't talk about politics here. We don't talk about current events unless the current event has something to do with food. So forget about your job for an hour. Forget about politics, and let's do what I like doing best, and that is talking about food. I was reminded the other day that when I first arrived in Los Angeles, I was really trying to get into the film business, but I had always cooked ever since I was 17 years old. At 17, I had a weekend job at the local hospital kitchen. I know hospital food is always the scapegoat for jokes, but I worked under a lot of elderly chefs that couldn't keep up the pace of a restaurant. So they packed it in and decided to work in an institutional type food. And they were just a wealth of information. I learned so much from them. I also, first time I learned about different types of diets. But when I got to California, I realized about 6 months after being there that I really didn't want to be in the film business. I really wanted to go the way of the culinary arts. So I went back to school and studied cooking, the culinary arts. And while I was doing that, I had a number of other jobs always involved in the food industry. But when I used to vacation in Los Angeles, there was a place that I discovered that my brother had turned me on to called the Bel-Air Hotel. Now, the Bel-Air Hotel is not your typical high-rise hotel. It is consistently considered one of the top 5 most luxurious hotels in the world. This hotel was spread out over 11 acres with the most beautiful, lush foliage about the property. And there it's still here, unless the fires do something to it, man, that's scary stuff. Lived through a couple of those. Anyway, it's spread out over 11 acres, has, I think, about 250 cottages. And there was an old saying in Hollywood that if you were coming up the ranks as a popular actor and you wanted to be noticed, you stayed at the Beverly Hills Hotel. If you were so big that you really just wanted your privacy, you stayed at the Bel-Air Hotel. So I got a job there. And the only thing that they had open at the time was room service waiter, which I was happy to take. I stayed there for 4 years and learned a lot about fine food service. And in retrospect, it was training me to have a long career as a private chef working for people very much in the public eye. A-list Hollywood celebrities. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Like I said, looking back after being a private chef for 25 years, I realized that my entire cooking career prior to that was literally training me for the private chef world. Now, there's nothing in any culinary academy throughout the United States that trains you to be a private chef. Don't know why. I have a suspicion that it's because it's fairly uncharted waters. The private chef world is completely different from the restaurant world. And the one main difference that I have seen over the years is about character. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you know, restaurant chefs often have the reputation of being prima donnas. And I can tell you, no one will put up with that in their home. You know, I want to take a minute to sort of lay something to rest, to clarify what a private chef actually is. They tend to throw that label around a little too loosely. You'll see the label private chef or personal chef. There's a difference, and it's a major difference. A personal chef is someone that is called upon usually to cook for maybe a family or, I don't know, a family on vacation or whatever. What they usually do, a personal chef usually cooks maybe for a family twice a week. They'll work for, the Smiths on Tuesdays and Fridays. Sometimes they cook at home and drop it off. It's called, ironically, a drop-off. Or they'll have a number of different clients where they'll cook for the Smiths on, Tuesdays and Fridays, and the Joneses on Mondays and Wednesdays. That is not what a private chef is. A private chef works exclusively for one family, full-time. Sometimes they travel with them. A personal chef is not going to be called upon to supply the Gulfstream 5 with food on their client's trip to Europe. It's just not the way it works. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of lay that to rest because every once in a while it just bothers me. And it's not, I don't mean like individuals necessarily call themselves private chef. I guess some do, but also companies. Employment agencies will say, oh, well, if you're coming to Myrtle Beach and you're staying on Mondays and Tuesdays, we can supply you with a private chef. That's not a private chef. It's a personal chef. Anyway, just had to get that off my chest. Getting hired by someone in the public eye, your cooking skills matter to them about 50% and your character the other 50%. I've seen it happen. I remember I was working for someone in the public eye, very well known household name. Can't mention who it is. I wasn't working there anymore, and I was asked to come back and fill in until their new chef came on. When the new chef came on, I worked with him for a while in the household and helped get him up to speed. And one of the days we were working together, as a matter of fact, it was like his first day. He asked me, he said, do you have any restaurant experience? And I said, well, a little, but a while ago. And he kind of went, huh, okay. And I thought for a second and I said, do you have any private chef experience? Because he came from a 5-star hotel. I asked him, do you have any private chef experience? And he said, no. I said, oh, okay. He lasted 6 months. Anyway, back to the Bel-Air Hotel. Bel-Air Hotel was training me to become a private chef, and I didn't even know it. What it was doing was, as a private chef, you don't just cook for the family. Very often you have to serve. So if you have to serve, you better have pretty good serving skills, certainly with high-end food. You also have to clean up. But the other thing that it trained me in is being able to conduct myself properly in the presence of very, very famous people. I remember this one time at the Bel-Air Hotel, one of the first couple of weeks that I was on, and I used to work the morning shift. I came in this one day, and I just happened to be looking at the VIP list. First day, I even noticed that it was there, and we were a bit slow at the time. So I looked up at the list, and I'm going down the names, and all of a sudden, I stop on George Harrison. And I thought to myself, the George Harrison? And I looked over to the right and it says affiliation ex Beatle. And I thought, oh my God. So I asked the order taker there, nice lady, worked there for a long time. And I asked her, I said, is it possible that if George Harrison orders something that I can be the next person to deliver to his room? She said, yeah, no problem. About 5 minutes later, she goes, Richard, George Harrison just ordered a pot of tea. And I thought, oh my God. So I got the tray ready, got the tea ready, got all of the accoutrements ready, and I headed off to his hotel room. And I'm walking through the property carrying the tray, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how I got here. This is so unbelievable, right? So I knock on the door, room service, and George Harrison answers the door. And he's on the phone, and he waves me in. And with shaking hands, I put down the tray, set out the teapot, the cup, all of the accoutrements. He signed the check, nodded to me, and I left, and I went out the door. And I thought, oh my God, I just met a Beatle. I ended up waiting on George Harrison probably 25, 50 times in the course of my employment there. And it was a cool thing. When it would rain, the Bel-Air Hotel room service would get slammed. Because remember, it's not a high rise. All of the bungalows you have to go outside in order to get to. And there's these little cobblestone paths. So if they order something larger than you could take on a tray, you've got to set up a table and you've got to wheel it across. You have to go with two people because you have to lift it up over the cobblestone walkway. Well, anyway, we're busy this one night and it's pouring down rain. And I would get back to room service from just doing an order and we'd have 10 tables backed up and the room service manager would just hand me the check, push a table at me and say, go, right? So all I'm thinking of is let's get this table to the room, get back. And we get to the room. I looked at the check where the room was and we get there and it's upstairs. And my colleague and I are lifting the table. We're going up the stairs. It's pouring rain. All I can think about is getting back to room service. Get in, get it set up, get the check signed, and get back to room service. And I knock on the door and I say, room service. And who answers the door but George Harrison? And I said, hello, Mr. Harrison. And he says, hello, Richard. And that dead air that you just heard is exactly what happened in the room. I'm standing there dumbfounded. I just couldn't believe it. George Harrison just called me by my first name. I couldn't believe it. I set up the table and I walked, not ran. I walked back to room service in the rain, trying to figure out how this kid from New Jersey ended up in this situation where a Beatle now knows me by my first name. I want to talk about a new pizza. I want to say place, but it's not a place. It's pop-up. For those of you who don't know what a pop-up is, very popular in Los Angeles before I left. A pop-up is a certain business. You know, they could have any kind of food business, that is. Pizza, donuts, desserts, I don't know, tacos, could be anything that people usually start in their home. They get good at it. They say, hey, you know what? I think that the public would be interested in something like this. And instead of forking out tens of thousands of dollars to open a restaurant or buy a food truck, they start doing what are called pop-ups. And what they do is they partner with a restaurant for a day, And what they do is they use the restaurant's kitchen to prep their product, and they put it out on social media, both the restaurant and the pop-up owner. And it gets people into the restaurant. Restaurant makes money because people buy drinks or buy food from their menu. And the pop-up business gets business that way. And it also gets them some exposure. It's a great deal. And it's really, really good for new entrepreneurs because, like I said earlier, they don't have to fork out all this kind of money and possibly go into tremendous debt. They can sort of, put their toe in the water and see how it goes. And the business that I'm talking about today is Pizza Squared. Pizza Squared is a home-based business that takes advantage of this new pop-up style of selling their product. And Pizza Squared is owned and operated by Ryan Everhart of Myrtle Beach, and his product is Detroit pizza. Now, everybody out there knows that pizza is my favorite thing on the earth. So when I discovered it on Facebook, I knew I had to be there. And you order in advance, which is another great thing for both the entrepreneur, because then they know about how much they have to make, and for the customer, because he can buy it or she can buy it in advance and just pick it up, either eat it there at that restaurant or take it with them. And it was at the Voodoo Brewing Company in Myrtle Beach. Detroit pizza has become one of my favorite. I discovered it before I left Los Angeles. It was starting to get popular out there. And for those who don't know, it is a thicker pizza. Became famous in Detroit, go figure. They're somewhere in between like a New York style pizza and Sicilian, about half the thickness of a Sicilian. And they're made in these special metal pans that are about, 14 inches by 8 inches or whatever. And they're, like I said, they're special metal pans that are seasoned before you use them. The dough is put into the pan. It rises. It's the second rise, which is another interesting thing about the Detroit pizza. I don't know if other pizzas that do this, maybe the Sicilian. I don't think so, though. Anyway, it rises first when you're making it, and then it gets punched down and put into the Detroit pizza pan, and it rises again. And the toppings are put on first, the cheese and pepperoni and whatever, and then the sauce goes on top of that, and it's baked at a pretty high heat. I think it's about 450, 500 degrees in a regular oven, and the entire edge gets so crunchy. But the cool thing is, the way they're cut down the middle and then cut horizontally so that every piece gets that crunchy edge crust, and it's just, if it's done right, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And Ryan Everhart's Pizza Squared is done properly. I was blown away. I'm gonna do a little deep dive into this. I hope I don't scare people away or bore people, but I am a stickler about pizza crust. And let me tell you what I loved about this. I said earlier that the edge gets so crunchy, and part of that is because the pan is heavily oiled, so the edges get really crunchy. But what I loved about it was, and I thought about this on the drive over, that I hope that I experience this when I get there, and that is that it's also crunchy on the bottom, but you have about an inch high of pizza dough, baked pizza dough. Now, a number of the Detroit pizzas that I've had in the past, it'll be a little bit, on the dense side, and I used to think that the reason for that is to be able to support the toppings. But Ryan Everhart proved that theory wrong, because his baked dough is so fluffy and so light. It was so delicious. Now, of course, I had mine as plain as possible. I did add a little bit of pepperoni on top of mine. And I think I ate most of that pizza on the way home. Excellent cheese. Really good quality pepperoni. There were different sizes of pepperoni on that, which, looked attractive. He's got some pretty wild pizzas there. He does one with spaghetti on it. I will get to that eventually, but my motto, I'm going to have, plain pizza first when I'm trying it. But it is well worth the trip anywhere. So make sure you check them out. That is Pizza Squared. Go on to Facebook and find it. Pizza Squared, Ryan Everhart. Join his group, and he will let you know when the next pop-up is coming around. Don't miss it. It really is good. Anyway, folks, coming up after the break, I've got my nephew coming back actually he's going to be calling in from Dallas. We were laughing hysterically on the phone the other day. Just a reminder, he's the CEO of a restaurant conglomerate in Dallas and has been in the restaurant business for 25 years now. But we were cracking up of some of the horror stories that we both have about the restaurants we've worked in. And I think you folks will enjoy that one. Coming right up. And welcome back to Talking About Food. And as promised, we're going to talk some horror stories of the restaurant and private chef world. I've got my nephew, Chris Florzak. He is the CEO of the Rise Restaurant Group in Dallas and also in locations in Tulsa as well. He was on this show a couple episodes back, but we were talking over the weekend and just cracking up at some of the different stories that we've all been through. So, Chris, welcome back to Talking About Food.
Great to be back, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wish you were in the studio. Anyway, you know what? Before we even get started, and I mean, this may just lead us into it, but I used to say when I owned my restaurant, right? And just for the listeners that they know, I believe you probably coached me at least once a week. At least once a week, I was calling you, interrupting your day to ask you your opinion on something. And I have to say, I don't know if I ever even told you this. 9 times out of 10, the answer you gave me was the one that I didn't want to do. I don't think there was ever but maybe one time when you said, nope, sorry, you're in the right about this. So,
well, that's how it goes.
Yeah, anyway, so I remember I used to say to the one manager, the person I could trust wholeheartedly, I would say, what is with this staff? One day, it's like they are God's gift to the world. They could do no wrong. The next day, it's like everybody's first day on the job. What's with that? Do you experience that?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. Day to day, one after the next. It's almost like, a restaurant as an entity, there's a lot of moving parts. It's almost like a living organism, right? You've got so much stuff that's fluid and, employees have different things that affect them from outside the restaurant that get carried into work, and then day to day, you've got a vast difference in the guests that walk into the building on how those things will act. So, I don't go down the route of like people that get into the horoscope stuff, thinking that it's the position of the moon. I think it's just more, hey, guests on, we'll call it Monday through Friday, can be a lot of business meetings, right? Smaller parties,
right?
Which is always easier for a kitchen. Not a lot of menu modifications, right? Then you get to the weekend, often, as a generalization here, and you have larger groups, which is harder for a kitchen to coordinate 5 or 6 dishes at the same time versus 2. On the weekends, you may have more families, so there could be more kids items or modifications to things. So when an order comes into a kitchen, if you've got 3 items that are ordered exactly how the menu has it stated, and the line guys can have made that in their sleep at this point,
right,
that's easy. But when you have a party of 6 or something of that nature, and everybody's sandwich or salad or what have you has additions or deletions, every one of those items just compounds itself and taking more time and taxes the kitchen. So you'll look around and sometimes you feel like you'll do X amount of dollars in sales and it was like you could have done it in your sleep, and then the very next night, same people, same restaurant, same menu, and you have half the sales and it just took 5 years off your life.
Yeah. Would you say that typically that's the way it is weekend compared to during the week?
Yeah, largely speaking, I mean, that would be one maybe broad stroke you could paint, but it can even happen within the week. It's just air conditioner or a cooler that's out there. All these things kind of throw icebergs into the mix.
Yeah, don't get me started with equipment. I had, as you know, 50-seat restaurant. I mean, no comparison to the size of restaurants that you have managed and now practically own. But this one time, and we were lucky to be busy once in a while. I mean, we had a good reputation. We weren't real big on the sales part of it, which is one of the reasons why I'm in South Carolina. Boy, that was fortuitous, I guess. And, but I remember this one time, I'm at the pizza oven. I've got 7 or 8 pizzas in the oven, right? I've got a packed house. There's people standing in the bar. And the bartender comes over to me and says, the CO2 is out. And the manager was off that night. And I'm like, got to be kidding me. And I make my way through the restaurant, like it's like a sardine can. I get to behind the bar. I'm kneeling down under there trying to figure out what's going wrong. And I've got an annoying customer leaning over the bar asking me questions.
And you got to maintain your composure.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah, equipment, that'll get you everything. I'd probably put at the top, I'm sure anybody listening to this episode who's worked even a day in a restaurant, at the top of the list of stressful equipment type scenarios would be when your POS system, your point of sale system, goes out.
Right. For the listeners, your cash register, we'll say.
Yes. Yeah. The system that restaurant uses for placing orders,
right,
which go into the kitchen, your check is calculated, all of that.
Credit cards.
Now, in a restaurant, exactly. All of that stuff's online. It's communicating to different parts of the restaurant because an employee can place an order. Some of those items are going to a printer for the guy by the grill. Some of those are going to a printer by the person who's working salads. It's really an orchestra. When that thing goes down, and it never fails, that it's never like the first table on a Monday when it's quiet. It's always, Saturday night or Mother's Day or Valentine's Day, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably at the top of the stressful moments as a restaurant operator and the team to try to maintain the composure, still handle orders in kind of your, if you're worth your salt as a manager, having your backup plan on how do we deploy handwritten checks so that the kitchen can still read. But any way you slice it, even if you've rehearsed the thing, it's enough to just make you want to just put down your coffee cup and walk right out the front door and never come back again.
Yeah.
It's because the guests, the whole point about a restaurant is people are coming in to enjoy and relax, right? They're escaping. You're putting on essentially what is a the stage is set and you're putting on a presentation, a performance.
Every
and
night
the goal
is
that they don't. That's right. They don't feel or know anything that's going on behind the curtain.
Yeah, and
so
go ahead.
And everything is a pressure cooker because time is involved, right? The guests sit down, they've just placed their order, the computer crashes, the clock starts now, and it's ticking, and you've got to solve it.
Right. And it's very interesting because two things. I want to go back to something you said before, that anybody that's worked in a restaurant understands this. I have been getting suggestions from listeners that they really like to hear what goes on behind the scenes. But I hesitated to do this with you or even myself to talk about the sort of horrors of the restaurant business. And I include the private chef world because I've got some stories that, will make people's hair stand up. I never wanted the listeners to come away from this thinking, we were looking for sympathy. That's certainly not what this is about. I'm doing it more because people are asking for more stories about what happens behind the scenes. And I thought, what better than this? So just to get that out there, you and
the bar is set high.
Yeah.
If you think about, there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of professions where, if you were in professional baseball and you bat, I don't know, 3 for 10, you're hitting 300, you're a pretty successful guy.
Yeah.
But, in the restaurant business, night after night, plate after plate, you're expected to be perfect. And that's the game we play.
Right.
That's what we aspire to. We want to do that. Yeah. So, it's not necessarily a sympathy thing. It's just, some of us like to get together and talk and share stories about, and it helps us learn, really. It helps us, hear the funny things that happened, and you kind of just trade stories, and it's like, I guess battle wounds, if you will.
Yeah.
Battle stories.
I think that the people like us who get involved in this, we're just interested in hospitality, good hospitality. It's almost like it's in our veins. I've said a number of times that when I would get a 2-star review, I'd think about it all day. And if I got a 1-star review, I was up all night, And what's that saying that, a happy customer tells one person, a dissatisfied customer tells 10, And when you put everything out financially, on the line, plus you being a people pleaser, you want everybody to be happy, I had 6 signature pizzas on the menu, right? And we were lucky to get a master sommelier to pair wines to the pizzas, right? And I've said it before. There are, thousands of sommeliers, out there. There are a handful of master sommeliers, and it was a friend of a friend, and he was happy to do it for me. But he paired one wine to each signature pizza. And I said to the servers, whenever I was training them, I said, look, I am not a wine connoisseur. I don't expect you to be a wine connoisseur. But when somebody asks you what wine goes with any specific pizza, I want you to know what that is. You only have to memorize 6 of them, right? So I happen to be privy to this, to the knowledge that this other restaurant owner was coming in, and he was successful too. And he came in with his wife, and I saw when he came in, and I happened to be going across the dining room, and I heard that restaurant owner ask the server, what wine would pair well with the Richie pizza? And she put her hands up and she goes, I like to eat healthy, so I try to stay away from pizza. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
I would run several restaurants that had wood burning grills. So there's
mesquite?
always but really live oak would be, live oak would be the preferred wood for that usage. But, there's a vented hood or exhaust type system that's above that some guests might not even notice is there, but that's pulling and drawing all of the smoke and the air from that area out of the building, out onto the roof, so you can still dine in a restaurant and not smell like
Right.
you're at a campfire. That's right.
Yeah.
But that's all mechanical too.
Yeah.
And I've been there, and again, it's never on a Monday night right as you're selling the final check. It's always in the thick of it.
Yeah.
When one of those, that exhaust would shut down, and when that happens, you hear it slow down or go off, and you've got about maybe 2 to 3 minutes before the entire restaurant is full of smoke.
And isn't it true there's a certain amount of time before that fire suppression system can kick in?
Yes. Well, that typically those are going to be triggered by heat. There's little heat links in there.
Used to scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But with the smoke, you've got a ton of guests. Everybody's drinking great wine. You've got people in wonderful clothes that don't want to go home smelling like they, worked the grill station all night long. Yeah. So you're trying to coordinate getting the wood out of the fire and out the back door safely. Yeah. You've got to communicate to people, again, understandably, people have come in and, what if somebody waited for an hour because they couldn't wait to have that grilled steak or fish that they remembered, right? Now you've got to proactively communicate, get to the table, have a manager or somebody, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, we know you've been here for an hour and a half and you were really excited, but we can't grill your fish right now. We can't grill your steak, Yeah. So
and here's the other thing
there's
too.
Ripple effects.
Yeah. Speaking of the ripple effect, there's also, you have to inform your staff not to act like there's something wrong.
Yeah, you've got to maintain composure, but you have to think of the layers. Obviously, you don't want to disappoint these guests.
Right.
You got to try to get the thing up and running, get the wood out of the building, communicate to the people that are expecting food. Yeah. Now you're also thinking, okay, the restaurant's on a wait. We've promised people an hour ago that their table would be ready in an hour.
Yeah.
So all of this is now going to slow down what we're doing. And we have to replace menu items, which is going to upset people an hour from now that were promised a table at this time.
Do you know, in my restaurant in Los Angeles, in the middle of the summer, it would get to 100+ degrees outside. I'm sure it happens a lot in Dallas as well. Our air conditioner, which was on the roof, we're a 1-story building. It was old. It got to the point where I was having a repairman come out in the summer, like once a month. And this one time the guy said to me, today's going to be a real hot one. He goes, we're up on top of the roof, right? And he said, I can't remember what part of the air conditioner it is, but it looks like there's these vents on the outside. He said, if you can pack this area with ice, you might be able to decrease the temperature in the restaurant by about 1 or 2 degrees. So me and this guy are like lugging bags of ice on top while the oven is trying to get to temperature at about, trying to get it up to 600 degrees.
Well, the show must go on. You got to do whatever it takes to, some people that have never worked in the business before, when they ask about, the stressful moments like this, I kind of liken it to saying, if they're married, hey, you remember being nervous right before the wedding reception that everything was going to go perfectly and flawlessly for the guests, or when you've ever hosted, say, Thanksgiving dinner or what have that pressure that builds when you've got 12 people coming over tonight at 6. I don't want the turkey to be dry, right? Now I said, now think about that feeling every single day, day after day, knowing hundreds of people that you don't know are going to come in and order things that you haven't, you can't see into the future, and have it all go flawlessly every single day.
Yeah.
That's the pressure game.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Speaking of, the oven hoods not working, I don't even know if you're aware of this, but Heidi, my wife, we bought our home here in South Carolina it was in January, and I had to stay behind until August in LA because the restaurant wasn't sold yet. And, we had sold our house there. So I was living, sleeping on the couch at a friend's house for those 9 months. But I also picked up a job. I was offered a private chef job with the most powerful man in the music business. And I didn't know. I mean, the restaurant wasn't making money. I needed to make some money. I got the manager to agree. He would run the restaurant during the week, and I would work there on the weekends. And I just couldn't turn down the money. It was great money. So I ended up, my wife left. I'm sleeping on the couch at a friend's house. I'm working full time for a very powerful man as their private chef. And my wife is, at that point in the beginning, was driving across country, right? And I'll never forget, I had, at the private chef job, I had 6 burners going because the person I worked for was having one of those power lunches with all of his executives. It was like 6 or 7 people. And my phone rings, and it's my wife halfway across the country saying, I needed to call the real estate agent immediately. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. At the same time, I get a text from my manager at the restaurant saying that the pizza hood vent is not working. Like,
of course.
I don't know.
Of course.
How? And I'm like looking at my phone. I'm looking at the 6 burners going on the stove, and I go, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. The boss comes around the corner and goes, hey, Richard, what's for lunch today? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm hoping I'm even going to put up. Now here, that's like not, crazy news to you. It's like, yeah, you know what? Mm-hmm. I've been there and done it. So what makes us keep going back the next day?
Well, because we love the business, the food and the service, right? And I will point to the fact that when things go the way they're supposed to, and the way you've rehearsed, and the way you've trained, right, and the whole thing is humming, there is a rush, almost an adrenaline type feeling, a euphoric feeling about when the music sounds good and the plates are clanking and food's coming out on time and the guests are happy and you're looking around and you're seeing, service be crisp and quick, and the whole thing is just set there and you pulled it off, and it's like, man, this is the best thing ever. It's the best feeling ever. It's the best feeling ever. So you're always chasing that feeling.
Yeah, it sounds like drug addiction. There's something there's something there that's
similar, probably.
Without a doubt. What do they talk about, the endorphins and all that other stuff? I'm sure that's going on at the same time. I'll never forget, I was having a real bad day. It was one of those I got through it, but I'm walking through the restaurant towards the end of dinner service, and I see this couple sitting at the table, and I'm going, wow, they were in last week for the first time. I remember going up to the table and introducing myself. So I go up and I said, hey guys, you're back. I guess that means you really like it. And they said, yeah. And also, we're celebrating. And I'm thinking they're going to say anniversary or whatever. And I said, oh, really? What's the celebration? And the woman says, I was tested completely free of cancer today. And I thought, they came into my restaurant to celebrate.
Yep. Puts it all in perspective.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You ever get it? I know you're in Dallas. You get celebrities that come in?
Oh, yeah. Throughout the career.
Yeah. They get special treatment?
Oh, we give the same treatment to everybody, honestly.
That's the answer.
That's like, I think we talked about it the last time we spoke about this topic was, every guest, like I think you had the example of, it could be some couple who saved up, $20 here and there to go celebrate for an anniversary or something. And they deserve the experience just as much as everybody else, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So no, not special treatment. The goal is, and I think anybody listening to this podcast that has worked in our business is you want to hit a home run every time you're at the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
used to have Ray Romano would come in on a regular basis. And you know what? Because
Really?
because I've worked for who I've worked for, but even before that, before you came on, I was talking about some of the stories that I had when I was working at the Bel-Air Hotel, and that kind of prepared me. It taught me how to conduct myself in front of celebrities. So
Yeah, yeah.
you're not looking like a deer in the headlights kind of thing.
Shaq was a great guy. Shaquille O'Neal, he'd call after a Lakers game to come, make sure we had a tip.
I
Of
would
course,
guess that
Shaq.
he's a friendly guy. Yeah.
Oh my God, he'd call me, on the way in, and of course we'd have a table ready for him.
Yeah.
Always over the top generous with the server. He'd start off and have an ice cream sundae as his appetizer course.
Of course.
And then a giant entree salad, and then a cheeseburger. I mean, the guy's just a gigantic guy coming from playing a game. Just a huge smile, really appreciative, and that's the kind of person you would do. You'd bend over backwards and do whatever you need to. But he was always great.
Yeah, I'll bet he was generous too.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
That's great. This one time at Flame, we were busy, and I guess there was about a half-hour wait. I don't know if I've ever told you this story before, but the hostess comes up to me, and the tickets are just pouring out of the printer, and she makes her way through the crowd of people, and she comes up to me, and which I don't usually see the hostess at the cooking station there, and she says, "I got to ask you something. Maya Rudolph is at the door, and she wants to know if she can get a table." I said, "Who's Maya Rudolph?" She goes, she's on Saturday Night Live. And I said, "How long is the wait?" And she said, 30 minutes. I said, "Well, then I guess she has to wait 30 minutes. I'm like, I'm not going to give you a table because you memorize lines well, And later on, after we were closed, the hostess is sitting at the bar having a drink, and she's just shaking her head, going, "I can't believe I had to turn away my favorite actress." Like, oh well, that's just the way it goes. Chris, what about guests? I mean, we're there. You know that old thing. The customer is always right. I don't necessarily believe that. And you know what? Before we go into that, is that true that the guest is always right?
No, I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
The default is always, again, going back to the nature of us to want to be hospitable, is you approach every situation with an open hand, giving the guest the benefit of the doubt, because typically, you don't want to be one of those businesses that is, so protective and thinking everybody's out to get you, that you wind up making, most people pay for the sins of just a few people who have tried to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to let some people get away with something and not let it tarnish, your spirit, or cause any type of resentment, or have you become jaded where you lose the spark of hospitality and taking care of everybody.
Yeah.
By nature, in our business, sometimes people, they're coming from. I mean, think about that guest that you just told us about. That came from the cancer screening. Right. Now that was a good news, right? But we also don't know. People could be coming from awful events, the opposite type of news, or the loss of somebody.
Funeral. Yeah.
So sometimes part of the training, you got to teach your staff, hey, we rise above all of that stuff. We try to take somebody, even if they're just unhappy or somewhat cranky. Let's see if we can turn that into a win with great service. But then every once in a while, there is the person that you can never make happy, or they take advantage of you. And I can think of a quick one comes to my mind. I actually had a guest one time, an employee run up to me and say, "Hey, Chris, we've got this lady who just bit into some glass in her dip, and her lip, her gum is bleeding. And obviously, the first thing is you feel terrible. I got to take care of this." Well, we had saved a piece of the glass, and the guest left and wound up bringing back a letter that their crown needed to be fixed, what have you. And I remember looking at this piece of glass, and I said, I know every square centimeter of this entire building. I don't recognize this piece of glass as being anything from our kitchen or china or glassware. And sure enough, in going through the insurance company, I said, this particular claim makes me feel a little nervous. Well, lo and behold, it turns out they found in their, a lot of the insurance companies share in their records,
Right.
people's information. And sure enough, this particular person had submitted the same exact claim to like 6 other restaurants in Texas, where,
Wow.
she was going in and purposely making her gum bleed with a piece of glass to try to extort, some money from any restaurant that was willing to pay for her dental work that needed to be done. So people can sometimes go to some extreme lengths, but again, luckily it's the rare thing, and you don't, again, want to punish everybody for the mistakes of a few.
You know what?
Yeah.
It's just coming back to me now. I remember you telling me the story this one time about somebody who complained because it took so long for their food to come, and you went back into your office and pulled up on the camera when they sat down.
Oh, I wouldn't remember exactly when that was specifically, but there'd be times like that. Yeah, unfortunately, again, sometimes people want to take advantage. One time I fell, as a beginning manager, I fell for what's become like one of the oldest tricks in the book.
What is
was
that?
The dry cleaning scam. And gosh, this was in a restaurant kind of near Beverly Hills. And of course, Sunday night, these people are pros. They know usually on a Sunday night it's going to be the beginning manager kind of thing. And a couple of guys walk in with a dry cleaning receipt and the business card of the GM saying, we were in here last week, and the server spilled a bunch of stuff on us, and here's the business card from the GM, said, get it dry clean, bring in the receipt, and we pay. So you don't want to bother the GM on a Sunday night, and the restaurant's still going, and you kind of pressure. So of course, what do? You go back to the office and you get $40 in cash or $50 in cash or whatever it is, and you walk out there and you hand it to them, and then you come to find out later on that the whole thing was, again, fictitious, and you just got played for whatever the cash was.
Yeah, and how did you find that out? I guess eventually you talked to the GM.
Well, then you wind up going back to the rest of the management team, including the general manager, and say, hey, did any of this happen? Did you give out a card? And everybody says no.
And do you, by any chance, remember what the GM said? Did he say?
Well, it was a great learning lesson for me. The GM handled it well and let me know, like, hey, here's a wise way to handle that.
Okay, what is that?
If a real spill actually happens, you want to take care of the guest right then and there, right? Number one, it's more hospitable, right? Instead of, hey, if we spill something on you, right, making you go to the dry cleaner, then drive the receipt awkwardly back to the restaurant so that I can hit, it makes the whole thing even more uncomfortable, right? A higher level of services, frankly, you're embarrassed. You should treat them to their entree or their meal or what have you. And you should say, you know what, that looks like it's going to need some dry cleaning. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take care of it here. Here's the money now, or we'll take that off of your check now, so that you don't have to be adding a whole nother thing onto your list and come back to the restaurant later on.
Yeah.
So it was a good learning lesson that GM was able to teach me, like, this, we're going to take care of it right at that moment. And then we also know that our system is never to do the whole, here's my card, bring the receipt back. So the next time that happens, you're aware.
What would you do today if that happened? Somebody walks in with a receipt like that and says the same.
Well, now I would say, oh my gosh, I'm terribly sorry. Please excuse me. I wasn't privy to the information, and I'd love to connect with the general manager. I'm unable to reach them now, but do me a favor. If I could get your phone number, I'm going to have the general manager reach out to you first thing tomorrow morning. So you can do your homework. But yeah, but again, many, many, many more just wonderful guests that really appreciate what you do and are the ones that are coming to your restaurant after their cancer-free screening or, appreciating what you're doing. And it's really best to just focus on those and continue doing what you like to do, which is making people happy and making, getting back to that adrenaline rush of the restaurant, humming the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. I had, one time, right in the middle of a service, a guy comes up to the station, the chef station there, and I never liked people coming up and talking to me, but positive or negative, because you got tickets flying out of the printer, and But like you said, and I did it. You made time for them as best you could. But this was it started out as a positive thing. The guy said, "Hey, Richard, I just wanted to let you know that," and he was a regular. He said, "You see that table of 10 back there? They're all new, and I brought them in for you because," and right in the middle of that, this woman comes flying up chef station there, and she goes, "All of our food is cold. What are you going to do about it?" Well, I didn't want to cut this guy off, because he was explaining to me, how generous it was, and it was generous that he brought all these people in, and the woman's screaming at me at the same time, and her server standing there, and I said, I'm thinking to myself, trying to think as quickly as possible, and I asked the server, I said, "What's on their ticket?" And she said 2 pizzas and 3 appetizers. I said, "Just comp it," because I felt like in that millimeter of a second that I was better off giving more time to the person who brought 10 people in than, losing $75 on this ticket. They both kind of walked away at the same time. And I pulled up the ticket that she had, and I'm like, the 3 of the appetizers were in those ceramic dishes, like fireproof. And I'm like, I'm looking at the time that the ticket came in. It was like 10 minutes ago, these things. I said, I got to check this out. So I start to walk over to the table. I could hear the woman say, I guess it was her children, "Come on, get up, get up, get up. He comped the dinner. Come on, come on." And the kids weren't even finished. And I got there before they left, and I held one of the ceramic dishes, and it was still hot. I said, "Ma'am, this is still hot." No, it was cold. And they just went out the door. I kind of got burned.
You got to chalk that one up.
Chris, we got probably 100 more each of this. And
easily.
We keep going back to this kind of work because I didn't even touch the private chef world. There's some stuff in there. There was a time when
you told me that great story recently about putting the center cut prime filet mignons on the grill and getting distracted, and then you turn around and the whole grill is smoking up.
Yeah, well, luckily that was with Mel, and he was easy going. My first trip to Europe, it was to Prague. Can't say who it was for. Part of my job, in addition to making sure that I brought, all the necessary food with me, was bringing their very, very high-end wine with me. And I had this incredible checklist. I mean, it was like 10 pages long, and I would go over it and over it and over it. And I get all the way there, and the first day the family calls for a dinner party, and I go to look for the wine, and I forgot it. Yeah, and I was on top of a mountain with, the town square was like half an hour down the hill. And this is one of those kind of things where you just got to think on your feet, right? So there was some security there. So I took out a wad of cash, about $3,000, and I just handed it to one of the security guys. And I said, "Do you know the best wine shop in town?" He goes, "Absolutely." I said, "Go down there and buy about 8 to 10 bottles of the absolute best wine that they have." And the client noticed that it wasn't their wine, but we did pull it off, So you go through things.
You remember that time you and I were sitting on a Sunday. It was your one day off. We're in London, and we're at a little cafe on the side of the street, ready to dig into some food. Finally,
it was an Indian place,
and your pager goes off, and you had to go run to the payphone. And you called, and the group that you were working for, somebody in the house wanted to have a particular item, and there wasn't an onion in the building, in the kitchen. So you had to, apologize to me and took off on foot. Yeah, luckily, we were kind of in the neighborhood, running to buy an onion to bring it over to the house so that, the folks that needed to be happy were taken care of, even on your one day off.
Yeah, and I remember I not only dropped off the onion, but I diced it for the dish that the person was making so that it was ready for them to go when they came into the kitchen, and ran back, met you back at the restaurant, and finished my lunch.
Which was fine with me because it gave me an excuse to have another Guinness or two, while I was waiting.
Yeah. These
you know.
these are great stories of experience, but the downside to having experienced what we have and being a restaurant owner, when employees come to you with problems that are so easily fixable, you just want to slap your
Mm-hmm.
forehead and go, seriously? This is what you're bringing to me now?
Yeah. Like the time I was running a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan that would freshly bake their bread every day, actually throughout the day.
Yeah.
And we would start with fresh bread every morning, which involves somebody getting there early. I mean, you made dough better than anybody else, but we would use active dry yeast on some burger buns, and every once in a while you just get into a batch where the yeast isn't acting. So before you know it, you got to ditch that whole batch, and service is starting at 11. You got to make the next batch. It's got to get into the proofer.
Right.
Your chest is pounding because you can't have something on your menu that you're really well known for that you have to tell everybody, all the guests, I'm sorry, we can't serve your sandwiches and burgers today because we don't have buns. To the average guest, their head's gonna want to explode. What do you mean you don't have burger buns? They're thinking, there's bakeries all over Manhattan. You can't get a burger bun. Finally, seeing that next batch, I think it actually was the third batch, hit the proofer, start to rise properly, get baked. I think it was coming out of the oven with maybe a minute. I can remember burgers already being on the grill, waiting for the burger buns to come out of the oven. When you're praying, to the bakery gods, please, can this batch work out?
The one thing when you said Manhattan, I don't know why it reminded me of this time at my restaurant that I used to sit around with the employees after the dinner service and after we were closed. And we're sitting around this one night, and all of a sudden, I hear this little pitter patter across the ceiling tiles above them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we had these ceiling tiles. I don't think that they could hold a cup of coffee. I think the cup of coffee would come, falling through. So I hear this pitter pat, and I know what it is. And
oh boy,
immediately we had an extermination company on the payroll. So immediately they were out there, and I said, look, I've never had this problem before, and I can't have this problem. Well, they put traps up on those little tiles and stuff, but they also explained to me that they found the entry of where it was coming in. It was a rat. And it was where all of the wires from the DirecTV and the POS system and it was going up there. It wasn't sealed properly. So, they made me feel very confident that it was plugged. But what the guy did say was, I can't guarantee that one rat isn't still there, but there won't be any more coming in. I'm like, okay. So the next day, we're closing up, we're getting ready to close, and there's one couple left in the restaurant, and they're sitting at the bar. And I'm a little bit nervous because we would only hear that pitter-patter at night. So they finally pay their check, they get up, they leave, close the door, and all of a sudden, I hear that pitter-patter, and the trap go off. And
You've got to be kidding.
I can hear it flopping around up there, and all of a sudden, it comes right through the ceiling tile and lands on the bar right where those people were sitting.
Oh, my goodness.
And I remember telling you about this the next day, and any time I had ever called you, like I said earlier, that 9 times out of 10, you would tell me what the solution is. I wouldn't like it, but I would do it. And basically what you were saying to me each time is that I called is, don't worry, Uncle Rich, this will be fine. You get through it. And when I told you about that, I remember asking you, if that rodent had fallen when those people were there, how would I have dealt with that? And I'll never forget, you said, Uncle Rich, That's one where you grab your keys and you go home and you're done. That's it. That's it.
The restaurant's done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. So we'll end with the rat story. And even with dealing with rodents, it's still something that we go back to all the time.
Yeah, we love it. I mean, it's magic, right? I mean, that's why everybody wants to go
well, everybody
sit around and listen to some music.
Anybody that wants to get into the restaurant business, they always that doesn't have experience. They always sort of romanticize it. Yeah, you walk around with a glass of wine, you talk to the customers. It is so
write up a menu. Yeah,
My mother used to make this, so therefore everybody's gonna like it.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah, it's a tough business. We're not looking for any sympathy. We love what we do, and
well, it really makes you appreciate the people who do it well, who have done it for their career. Yeah. I remember having the one of my life's pleasures, making it to Brooklyn to go have a slice of pizza made by at DeFara's Pizzeria in Brooklyn by the original owner, Dominic. And he recently passed away, but I'm going to say he was in his 80s. But there, seeing his worn cutting board and the way he could almost pull a pizza with his bare hands out of the oven. They had been so conditioned to the heat, but that labor of love that he stood there hours a day after day, week after week for years with the passion of that one particular food item and doing it well. I mean, it's far more dedication than I ever had inside me, but it's what we do.
Yeah,
it's what we do. That's what you get pulled into.
It's like what you said before. It's when it's working properly, it's like a well-oiled machine. It's like an orchestra that doesn't miss a note. And yeah, it's very drug-like. Chris Florzak, right. CEO of Risen Restaurant Group in Dallas. Like I said before, we've got this. This should just be part one. Yeah, the restaurant horror stories. Okay. Well, listen.
That's right.
Thanks for this, Chris.
Hey, anytime. It's my pleasure. A lot of fun.
Appreciate it. And that's just about going to wrap it up. Episode number 14. Remember, check out Pizza Squared. It's well worth it. Follow Ryan Everhart of Pizza Squared on Facebook, and I'm sure there'll be another pop-up real soon. Also, if you're interested in a private in-home cooking demonstration or cooking class by me, the Private Chef to the Stars, you can get more information from my website, theprivatecheftothestars.com. If there's restaurants you want me to check out or festivals or food trucks or whatever, you can email me at theprivatecheftothestars@gmail.com. And whether I'm talking about supplying a Gulfstream 5 with food for my client or talking about a specific recipe, always remember that I cooked in a home just like you do. So always remember, you are your family's private chef. And George, if you're listening up there, it was an honor.